Welcome to B2B Bytes. Today I'm joined by Kazenmeyer. He is Tradecentric's VP of Channel Development and is responsible for the strategy and growth of their partner ecosystem. That includes driving penetration and adoption amongst B2B businesses, buyers and suppliers in that network. Welcome to B2B Bytes, Kevin.
Hey, thanks again for having me, Lance. Appreciate it.
This is our second session. In our first session, we had an overview, a real introduction to e-procurement. And in this session, I want to dive a little bit deeper and understand some of the benefits that your customers see when they implement e-procurement and punch out, and some of the costs, so that those listeners have a better understanding of what they can expect. So maybe let's start with the benefits. I think that's always a good place to start. So Kevin, maybe give us some examples of customers that Tradecentric have that have implemented e-procurement and the growth that it's driven for them, or maybe just even better customer satisfaction.
Yeah, so that's great. And I feel like, we could go on a lot of different paths with this, because not only, I tell the story a lot, not only do I work for Tradecentric, but I was also a past customer. So I received a lot of the benefits as a customer of the former Tradecentric, which was Punch Out to Go. And I was able to see a lot of growth within my existing customers, but also expand customers. But I'll give you a couple of good examples of the opportunities gained. So what we like to call, when you connect not only Punch Out, purchase order, and invoice, we call that connected commerce, right? So you're fully connected from the purchase process, so the entire procure to pay process, right? And what we're seeing now is there's a benefit when I launch Punch Out, because there's that visibility, right? That added visibility into my supply chain. My customers can make an educated decision. They can see my pricing, and they're more inclined to maybe buy from me because they know exactly what their price is going to be. But when I add on receiving automated purchase orders and electronic invoicing, it's kind of locking in that customer now, because I'm providing them a service that's basically giving it a hands-off approach for them. And I am eliminating a lot of the friction points that may have existed in the past. So just a couple of examples of some of our customers that have implemented. We have an electrical supplier that started off, as I mentioned on the first session, they were told they needed to show up and have a punch out site for some of their customers. So they went ahead and they tried to create it on their own, and ultimately they turned to us to help them. And we got them set up with a punch out, and they started to see some traction. They started to see different buying behavior changes, and so they started to dig into it a little bit further. And they started talking to their customers. And when they found out that the customers were not only buying the branded products that they were the known distributor of, they were expanding outside of that brand. And so they started to pull stats, and they found that their customers were having a year-over-year 50 to 70% increase in sales of the non-preferred branded products, which is amazing. Right? So now you tell that story to your sales team, and you have believers, because they want to go out and they just say, hey, if I could turn this on and they can connect and I could grow, this is great. Well, once they realized that connection, they went ahead and they connected the invoicing. So now they did the full loop. They made it seamless and easy with the full connected commerce. And what they started to see then is, because they were showing up in their customers' platforms, they were a regional distributor. They weren't only selling in the region now. They were selling nationally. And they started seeing an 8% increase in sales from locations that were outside of their traditional service area. Again, all because they showed up in the platform.
That's a great example. So I should think of that. I'm a distributor, and I've now got my products listed in this e-procurement tool that my buyer's using. But I don't just have one or two products. I have all of my products available, and they're available not just to those buyers that I'm usually servicing, but to their entire business. I get this double whammy of growth, both regionally and outside of the region that I'm currently selling to, but also the products that maybe they've never looked at in my catalog before and now available to them, and they start buying. That's a real growth engine. That's great. And as we think about that, everyone's gonna say, well, that sounds like something I want. I wanna leverage that growth. So what does it take to actually implement and to connect into the e-procurement system that my buyer is using? What is the cost of doing it? As we start to think about an ROI for our listeners here, so they can start to, as they're writing their proposal and they can share it with their board, how should they think about that ROI?
Well, I mean, the cost could vary depending upon the market that you're targeting and how many connections that you're thinking of. But the initial investment is below six figures, right? So if you're thinking about what it's going to take for me to get this set up and to start transacting with customers, it's very minimal in comparison to some of the other software that you would see out in the market. And the additional benefit is that as part of our ROI, we also are able to show that there's a significant decrease in IT resources necessary after the initial setup, right? After the initial setup and configuration, all the ongoing maintenance and support and follow-up is typically on the Tradecentric side. We're maintaining those connections. We're maintaining all of the transaction sets and the protocols that change with these procurement systems that typically an IT organization would have to prioritize and fit into some sort of development cycle. And so now when you remove all of that, you're able to react faster with less resources. So that ROI just on the time and effort from an IT side of things is tremendous, right? So again, I don't want to diminish the fact that if you have a complex tech stack, you may have an SI to help you at the beginning to set it up. But once you get over that hump and once you've configured it, it kind of starts to run on its own.
I love that. You mentioned something there that kind of piqued my interest around invoicing and connecting kind of the entire buyer cycle. Could you just double click into that and what you meant by that? How does that improve maybe the experience on the buyer side, and how can that be beneficial to me, the distributor, as well?
Yeah, so it's interesting because the distributor side would say doesn't matter. But this one's close to my heart because I spent the last year at a lot of buyer conferences. And I'll give you this quote. In the one that I was at in November, there was a head of finance talking to a bunch of users on a particular procurement application. And they said, invoices still suck. And it was interesting because it was the truth. It was, we only have 6% of our suppliers sending us electronic invoices. The other 94% take so much time and effort and resource involvement, and that there's just, it becomes a pain. So what some of these buying organizations do is they go, I'm just going to try to move business to some suppliers who are less of a pain. And if you're going to continue to cause me pain, then maybe I just won't have to do business with you anymore. And so when you think about the invoicing side, we actually have some customers that some distributors that started with invoicing. And they actually grew their sales because when they started providing electronic invoicing and providing that easy match without failures and errors and exceptions, they said, "Oh, we're going to buy more from them." And so they increased and they increased. And, one of our customers who is started off as an invoice only saw 15 to 20% revenue growth from just sending electronic invoices, right?
That's incredible. That is incredible. And I can imagine it too, right? I'm a buyer and I place a PO and I am getting that product, but the invoice isn't getting paid. Who is that company coming back to? They're coming back to me, the buyer, because it's likely my email that they saw on the order in the first place. And so as a buyer, well, if I can purchase from a supplier who I know is integrated into my procurement system. Invoices are going to be immediately paid. They're not coming back to me to bother me for payment when it doesn't happen for some reason because things haven't gone quite right. Yeah, that makes sense. I'd like that a lot, and that makes that's a huge benefit that I think most people don't think about when they think of e-procurement.
Well, and there was one more thing I would add into this, and this was big for me and when I was a supplier, is that we had a lot of customers that would go on credit hold. And there's nothing worse than a buyer going on credit hold. But once we started e-invoicing them, the credit holds went down. Because guess what? You're providing them an invoice. It's taking advantage of the capabilities of that that e-procurement platform, and it's matching it and giving it the okay to pay, and you're getting paid rather quickly. So now your day sales outstanding goes drastically lower, right? In some cases, 30 to 40% lower. So what would you do if you were an AR team and all of a sudden you're like, I have money to play with now. I'm not trying to down, outstanding invoices. I'm actually getting paid.
Yeah, I love that. That quote to cash is so important. Getting paid faster, speeding up that cycle. That has real benefits, real benefits to businesses. Kevin, this has been absolutely fantastic. We dived deep on e-procurement, and I think our listeners are going to be incredibly interested to learn more. I know they can find you. Google Tradecentric, and you will find the wonderful folks over at Tradecentric, or follow Kevin on LinkedIn as well. You can reach out to him there. Thank you so much for joining us today, Kevin.
Hey, thanks again. I appreciate you having me.